Adrienne, you're a relatively young, but certainly an accomplished rider in the sport of dressage. I want to ask you, how do you think your youthfulness has helped you?
Well, I touched a little bit, on Wizard and I learning together, and I think he's kind of a strong-headed, got a little bit of an opinion sometimes, especially when we came together, when Debbie McDonald gave me the chance to start riding him. And I think you kind of had to take everything he did with a grain of salt. You couldn't get too upset. Sometimes he was great, sometimes he was not great, and we'd kind of learn together, and you have to let it roll off your back. And I think, maybe that's something that I was naive enough to not let any of it bother me, so I just kept on going.
Innocence at that age,
yes.
Yeah. As a competitor, I want to talk to you, how do you get into that headspace to be able to compete? I'm sure, specifically at the Olympics, nerves must play a huge factor. So in other words, how do you control those nerves? How do you get into that headspace?
I think the hardest part for me, I've been pretty lucky. I've never had, horrible issues with suffering from nerves, but I think the hardest part is always, before you get on. You've got all those hours to kill, especially at the Olympics with one horse. And so for me, it's kind of a matter of keeping myself focused on other stuff. Go watch the other rides, go enjoy London, go do stuff so that you're not just sitting there stewing on your one.
Exactly.
You know what to do, and by the time you get in the saddle, then it's everything's kind of cleared in your head. At that point, you have something else to focus on. You've got this horse, this animal you've got to pay attention to. So once your foot's in, legs over that saddle, I think it's pretty easy to just get back in the groove of doing what you know how to do.
Agreed. So the waiting, that's the hardest part sometimes. Your horse Wizard, you've been riding him since 2006. How has Wizard changed over the years? And what's his temperament like?
The Thomases bought Wizard as a 5-year-old from the Netherlands. And he was very talented, very big, athletic.
He is big. Strong-willed
creature. And he was quite a fiery little thing. Just physically, we're height-wise matched a little bit better than Debbie and Wizard were. Her being just over 5 feet, me being almost 6 feet, and he's 17 one hands. And,
wow.
And so she gave me the chance to sit on him, and we just kind of seemed to click right from the beginning. And it's been quite a journey with him. But I think he's changed a lot. He used to be, very hot-tempered, very almost aggressive if you come at him. It was like, no, he's going to do it his way, and you couldn't come at him head on. So you had to kind of learn different avenues and figure out how do we approach this so that we can get him working with us instead of working against us. And I think it's taken a lot of years, but I think he's really changed and starting to build trust and a better relationship.
Absolutely, and that's great, and I think that certainly occurs over time. How has your understanding of horse psychology made you a better competitor?
That's an excellent question, and I think really what people don't understand a lot of time about our sport is half of it is psychology. Because you've got this animal that you can't just explain things to. So you've got to really learn how to work with them. And I think the more horses you're given the chance to work with, the greater your toolbox becomes, the more ways you learn to approach things. I really think horses are just like kids. We're starting to figure out now in our systems that not all kids learn exactly the same way.
Agreed.
There's kids that can be brilliant if you approach them the right way, and you got to find what makes sense to them, what gets them going, and what works for them. And I think horses are the same way. And just the more horses you've got experience with, whether or not they're dressage horses, Western horses, little beginner cheap horses, expensive horses, it's all, the same psychology. It's what does this horse thrive on? What's the best way to get him to understand and to want to work for us?
How did you get that experience?
I think it's hours in that you put in with an animal. I grew up on a little cattle ranch. We had horses from the time I was little, and that's where I was. From the time the sun was up, I was out with the horses in the morning, and then I really got into horses. I started eventing through the United States Pony Club, which is a wonderful organization that taught you a lot of the horsemanship skills and everything. And I never had a super fancy horse, and I've been on and off between horses. They'd been hurt or this or that, but I would still, you could go and show up and I'd watch the other kids take their lessons, and I'd kind of sit around and wait for a horse to be naughty. When a horse would start being naughty, then they'd say, okay, Adrienne, hop on now, you can get a lesson. And so then you got to, there you go, you got to go get your lesson for the day. And so you learned a lot, just by throwing your leg over whatever you could ride at the time and putting the hours in the saddle.
Experience, but I've heard, you have that knack to really be able to work with some of these problematic horses. Is that true?
I've had a lot for sure, and I think hopefully, you try to approach everything from a way that try to think of it from the horse's point of view, and if something's not working, it's up to you to change it. It's not up to the horse to change the way it thinks. It's up to you as a trainer to find a new avenue to make them understand what you want.
What is your favorite aspect to training others, And what specifically gives you the most satisfaction and joy of doing so?
I love teaching. I do a lot of teaching. I've done it since I mentioned earlier came up through the United States Pony Club system, and a lot of that is emphasis back on teaching younger upcoming riders. And I've always enjoyed that, and I love working, everyone from the kids to the adult amateurs to the other professionals. I think it's just really exciting when you see that little, what I call a light bulb moment, or that spark go off, like, oh, I get it, that part. And that's what keeps you going in this sport, is every day you think you finally get it, and then you realize you don't, because then you learn more the next day, and then you keep going. But it's just all these little challenges and little victories every day that it's really fun to watch someone else, come across them in their own time.
Sure. Adrienne, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule to meet with us, and I wish you the best of luck in all of your endeavors.
Thanks for having me.